Hey there. There we go. Okay, so this lesson will go over summarizing. Um, and this can be used whether you are writing just a freestanding summary on its own, which you might be doing in other classes, or if you're writing a summary that's part of a longer essay, the way you'll be doing in this class. So let's talk a little bit about what a summary is before I talk about how to plan your summary. So when you summarize, you're basically condensing the piece that you've read, condensing it and focusing on the major details, the main idea, leaving out anything very specific. So we're just trying to give a general overview of what you've read. So often an article like the one that you've read now will be summarized in a paragraph. A paragraph will be summarized in a sentence. So it's condensing the original into the most important information, right? So an effective summary, one of the things you want to make sure you're doing is covering all the major points in the article. Sometimes when people summarize, they focus too much on the beginning of the article and they kind of fizzle out at the end. You make sure being consistent, summarizing all the major points throughout the article. But you want to leave out the minor details. So that's how we get that condensed version of it, is that what you're avoiding are specific quotes, specific examples and numbers and names. So those minor details will be sort of swept to the side when you summarize, and you're going to focus on the big picture. So as I said, it's a condensed version. A good rule of thumb is that a summary is about 10 to 20% of the original article. The other thing you want to make sure that you're doing when you summarize is that you're presenting the information in your own words. I think I've talked about this before, where being able to explain something in your own words shows that you truly understand it. If all you can do is copy the words out of the original article, that's not showing me that you understood what you read. So to be able to show that you understood what you read, you want to be able to explain it in your own words. One thing that this means is that you want to make sure that when you're writing a summary, you're not looking at the original article, because it's very hard to put things in your own words if you're looking at the article, all right? People tend to get into that habit of just like kind of switching the words a little bit instead of really explaining it in their own words. And that's something we'll talk about later. You also want to avoid direct quotation. The other thing that you want to keep in mind when you're summarizing is that summaries are objective, they're neutral. You'll be leaving out any of your ideas and opinions. They might come later in the essay if you're using a summary as part of a longer essay, but they don't belong in the summary, right? So you're just reporting what the author said. Another thing to keep in mind with that, since you're reporting what the author said, anybody who summarizes the same article, so if we were in class and we have 20 people in the class, and if we are all summarizing the same article, if we're doing it correctly, we're going to have pretty much the same content in that summary. Because if we're just objectively reporting what's there, we will all have the same information. All right. So sometimes students get a little hung up on that, thinking, well, we're all going to have the same information. Yeah, you are, because you're just reporting what the author said. So if we're all doing it correctly, we're going to have the same information. Another thing to keep in mind, and this has to also do with the complete bit up here, sometimes when students are doing a summary as part of a longer essay, sometimes they're mistaken and thinking that all they can include in the summary are the ideas that they're going to respond to later in the essay, and that's not the case. The summary should report the whole article, then you can choose what you're going to respond to later. But really just think about the summary as part of your essay, but it's really its own little unit where you're just reporting all the most important ideas from the original article, whether you're going to respond to them or not in your essay. Okay? And then the other thing you want to make sure you're doing in a summary is, using frequent attributive tags. So an attributive tag is something that refers to the author somehow. This is a way that we kind of show that this is still the author's ideas, even though we're putting it in our own words, it's still the author's ideas. So we want to make sure that we're reminding the reader that I'm reporting what this other person said, okay? If I read a summary and there's a sentence that doesn't have an attributive tag, sometimes I wonder if the student is sneaking their own ideas into that summary because they haven't attributed it to the author, all right? Now, I know that that sounds like all of your sentences. You might worry that it's going to sound monotonous and repetitive if you're repeating the author's name in every sentence, but you don't have to use the author's name. You just have to refer to the author. So you might use their name, or you might use a pronoun like he or she or they, if it's, plural, or you could probably just use they anyway. You could use words like the author or the article. So you don't always have to have the author's name in there. I would maybe every couple sentences put the name in, but then you can vary with pronouns and things like that. The other thing that will add variety is different verbs that you can use. So let me show you what I mean by that. There we go. Okay. Oops, I keep doing that. So here's a list of signal verbs that I'll provide to you. Sometimes attributive tags are also called signal phrases, so you might hear me interchange those terms. So another way you can add variety to your attributive tags is by varying the verbs that you use. Okay, so I'll provide that to you. I do want you to notice that the verb talks about is not on this list. A lot of students want to use talks about, and I don't know if it's just a pet peeve of mine or if it really isn't a verb that you should be using, but it's not on this list. Try to avoid it if you can. So you can vary how you refer to the author. You can vary the verb that you use. The other thing is that the attributive tags or signal phrases don't always need to be at the beginning of a sentence. So it could say, another point the author makes, or furthermore, according to Jones. Okay, so there's like different ways that you can add that variety. So it's not always, so basically what I'm saying is that your summary isn't always going to say, Jones says, Jones says, Jones says, Jones says, right? You're going to add some variety to it. Now, this is all stuff that you'll worry about. Don't worry about it. This is all stuff that you'll address when you start drafting and revising your summary paragraph, but just to put it out there. Okay. So the writing process, even for something as seemingly simple and brief as a summary, you still want to use the writing process, whether it's part of a longer essay or whether it's just a summary that you're writing for another class. So we plan, we draft, we revise. So right now we're just talking about planning the summary. So we'll stop with this. Okay, so the first part in planning is always pre-writing to generate your raw material. So that means that you're annotating the article. And as you annotate, you're looking for the major points. We're looking for repetition. Sometimes transitions can also help identify the major details. We talked in the post-reading strategy lesson about how to write the main idea sentence in your own words. So a list of words and concepts that are repeated throughout the entire article. Oops. Okay. And then you want to make a list of the major details. And again, you want to make sure that you're doing this in your own words. So one habit to get into is as you're annotating, write a sentence in your own words for, if it's a big paragraph, you can write it for each paragraph. If they tend to be shorter paragraphs, you might want to try to group related paragraphs. Write a sentence in your own words in the margin. And then what I would do is list those on a separate sheet of paper. That's kind of what your summary plan will look for. And then you would check over that list to make sure that you've included everything that's important from the article, that you're leaving out specific details, that you haven't included any of your opinions, and that it's pretty much in your own words. These are things that I will be checking on your outline when you submit it to me. So that's what I'll be looking for. All right. And I will give you some recommendations, and you will make any necessary changes before drafting. So let me bring over the sample, the example document. Oops. That matches what you're doing. Okay. So the Skenazy article that I've been using as the example, and that is in the D2L course as the example, it's kind of short, and there's not a whole lot to it. So when I read through it to kind of work backwards and come up with this outline, I really only saw 3 major details. that many students are unfamiliar with occupations other than the ones they hear about all the time, that being more fulfilled with a job leads to just a bigger sense of purpose and longer retention, more interest. And then at the end, she provides examples of different programs. All right. So this is what I would have as my summary plan, just a list of those major details that I picked up on from the article. You might have more than this. Usually in summary plans, I see more than 3 bullet points. One way to kind of estimate how many you might need, well, I don't know. I might be getting, I'll talk about that in another lesson, all right? But I would go for maybe, maybe around 4 to 6 might be a good kind of goal. But if you have more or less than that and you feel like you're on the right track, that's fine. But maybe try to go for 4 to 6 might be a good goal for these. All right. So that's all we're working on in this lesson. And this little snippet here is just planning the summary paragraph by listing the major details of your selected reading 1 in your own words. Add that to your outline plan. Make notes if you have any questions. And when you submit the outline, I'll look it over for you. All right? Okay. Take care. See you in the next lesson.